September 9th, 1943, Salerno, Italy. Before dawn. The air, thick with the smell of brine and fear, pressed down on the coast. In the gloom, beneath the towering peaks of the Monte Picentini, waves of American and British infantrymen sloshed ashore, beginning the long, brutal slog up the Italian peninsula. For many, this was the first terrifying taste of war. But in their hands they carried a promise, a mechanism of brass, steel and walnut wood designed to change the very calculus of the infantry battle, the M1 Garand. It was heavy, undeniably so. A full 5 pounds, nearly half a pound more than the iconic German Mauser Kar-98K. It was complex, requiring specialized tooling and meticulous maintenance. Yet, beneath its seemingly clumsy exterior lay a fundamental revolution. It was the first standard-issue, gas-operated semi-automatic rifle to equip an entire army. The prevailing wisdom of the 1930s, especially in the militaries of Germany and Great Britain, was that the bolt-action rifle remained the pinnacle of infantry design. It was reliable, simpler to produce, and its higher velocity round was deemed sufficient. The Americans, however, embraced a different, more industrial philosophy. This is the core irony we must grasp. The weapon that would eventually dominate the close-quarters firefights in the olive groves and mountain passes of Italy was for years an object of frustration, nearly abandoned, viewed as a complicated folly by many of its own generals. To understand the weapon, we must know the man, John Cantius Garand, a quiet, intensely focused Canadian immigrant working for the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. Garand was not interested in incremental improvements. He sought a weapon that would exponentially increase the infantryman's rate of fire without sacrificing power. His journey was a testament to persistence. For over a decade, from the late 1920s through the mid-1930s, his designs faced countless technical hurdles, bureaucratic skirmishes, and the persistent question of cost. Early prototypes were rejected. The original plan to use a smaller, lighter, 276 caliber round was overruled by General Douglas MacArthur, who insisted the Army retain the powerful established .30-06 cartridge. This decision added weight and complexity, but ultimately guaranteed the rifle had the necessary stopping power for the long ranges encountered in European and Pacific combat. The rifle was finally adopted in 1936, but the teething problems continued. Field strips were complicated, gas ports failed, soldiers grumbled. They had been trained since childhood on the simple, robust mechanics of the bolt-action rifle. The Garand was an unknown quantity, a sophisticated machine thrust into the brutal simplicity of mud and blood. What truly differentiated the M1 was not just its design, but the colossal industrial machine built to produce it. The bolt-action rifle, for all its simplicity, was inherently a craft weapon, requiring precise machining and hand-fitting. The Garand, by contrast, was designed for the assembly line, a testament to American manufacturing might. While European nations were focused on tanks and aircraft, the US was preparing to arm an army of millions with a technologically superior personal weapon. Springfield Armory and the Winchester Repeating Arms Company geared up to produce an unprecedented volume of rifles. The scale was staggering. By the end of the war, over $5 million Garand rifles would be produced. In 1943, as the Salerno invasion began, the question was not technical, but psychological. Could this heavy, complex piece of engineering survive the rigors of combat? More importantly, could its revolutionary potential overcome the entrenched mindset of the battlefield? The German High Command, watching the Americans land, dismissed the M1 as a curiosity. Their intelligence reports acknowledged the semi-automatic nature of the new American rifle. But the bolt-action Kar-98K, with its known reliability and high-powered round, was seen as more than adequate. This initial dismissal was a fatal strategic oversight. The M1 Garand carried an 8-round en-bloc clip. The clip itself was the key to its speed, allowing all 8 rounds to be loaded instantly. But it also contained its one major audible flaw. Once the final round was fired, the empty clip was ejected with a sharp metallic p-ting. Soldiers, both American and Axis, immediately realized the significance of that sound. For the American riflemen, it signaled a moment of vulnerability, the need to reload. For the German or Italian soldier facing him, it was a precious, brief moment of opportunity. The early fighting in Italy became a deadly lesson in managing that P-ting. Did the sound invite a rush? Could a soldier feign a reload? These tactical nuances would be learned on the fly, in the dark, in the suffocating terror of a sudden ambush in a dusty vineyard. The stage was set. The rifle, an industrial leviathan, was finally in the hands of the infantry. The mountain paths of Italy would become the proving ground for a new type of warfare, one defined by the sheer volume and speed of fire, a rate that the enemy, locked in the mindset of 19th century tactics, simply could not match. The opening shots have been fired, but the true impact of the Garand is yet to be realized. If you want to witness how this weapon fundamentally changed the infantry battle and hear the stories of the soldiers who wielded it, make sure you don't miss the next chapter. Hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications so you can follow the thunder of the M1 Garand as it rolls up the spine of Italy. Late 1943, the Gustav Line. The initial shock of the M1 Garand was not registered in grand strategic reports, but in the frantic, close-quarters combat reports from the front. The fighting in Italy quickly devolved into a nightmare of mountain warfare. Narrow paths, fortified villages, and dug-in positions where visibility was measured in meters, not miles. In this environment, the classic bolt-action rifle excelled in accuracy, but utterly failed in volume. The typical rate of sustained fire for a highly trained soldier with a Mauser Kar-98K was perhaps 15 rounds per minute. The same soldier, equipped with the M1 Garand, could easily sustain 40 to 50 rounds per minute. This was not a small change. It was a fundamental shift in the rhythm of the fight. An American rifleman, Private Eddie V. Rickenbacker, not the ace but a common infantryman, later described the experience. You'd put 8 rounds down range and they'd be looking for the 9th, but you were already reloading, and the volume of noise and fire was just terrifying to them. They were used to waiting for the bolt to cycle. The initial enemy reaction was one of pure disbelief, bordering on operational paralysis. The Italian army, fighting bravely but often under-equipped and strategically fractured, bore the brunt of this initial firepower shock. Their standard rifle was the Carcano Model 91, a light, maneuverable, but distinctly bolt-action weapon. Against the M1, the difference was catastrophic. Imagine the perspective of a young Italian fusilier holding a fortified position in a small Italian town. He hears the characteristic American fire-and-move tactic, a burst of machine gun fire followed by the sound of rapid, continuous rifle shots. The American approach was not to pick off individuals, but to lay down a blanket of suppression. A captured Italian NCO, interrogated after the collapse of one position, was quoted in an intelligence summary. "When we fire, we must wait, open the bolt, pull it back, push it forward, and close it." In that time, the Americans fire 4-5 times. We think, they must have a machine gun for every man. We won't compete with that, non possiamo competere. This wasn't just a technical disadvantage, it was a psychological weapon. The Garand created the perception of a numerically superior force, even when the sides were equal. The speed of fire forced Axis troops to keep their heads down, severely limiting their ability to aim, observe, or coordinate counterattacks. The Germans, relying on their technologically superior machine guns, like the MG-42, were slower to acknowledge the threat posed by the M1. They initially viewed the individual rifleman as a secondary element. However, as the fighting intensified, particularly in the unforgiving terrain of the Apennine Mountains, the reports from their front lines became increasingly urgent. German officers noted the extreme difficulty in assaulting American positions. The rate of incoming rifle fire made the space between cover virtually impassable. From a German 90th Panzer Grenadier Division after-action report, 1944, the enemy's sustained rifle fire is surprisingly effective and highly disorienting. It often leads to the impression that our company is facing a battalion. The characteristic sound of the American self-loading weapon is a significant morale-damaging factor. The Germans had their own self-loading rifles, notably the Gewehr 43. But it was adopted late, suffered from initial reliability issues, and crucially was never produced on the scale necessary to equip the German army en masse. By the time the G43 was entering the battlefield in limited numbers, The US had already fielded millions of Garands. The contrast highlighted a core difference in the two nations' warfighting philosophies: American industrial scale versus German technological superiority in specialized small-batch weapons. For the American soldier, the challenge shifted from initial adoption to tactical mastery. The peating sound, once a liability, was transformed into an opportunity through deliberate training and field experience. Experienced riflemen developed the mad minute of the M1, a rapid, controlled burst of fire that would empty the clip, forcing the enemy to take cover. The soldier would then deliberately slam a new clip home, perhaps even yelling to mask the sound, or better yet, covering the peating with a single controlled burst from a nearby Browning automatic rifle, BAR, or M1919 machine gun. Another field-developed tactic was the dummy shot. A soldier would fire 7 rounds, wait, and then, before firing the 8th, quickly eject the 7-round clip manually, making the peating sound. When the enemy rushed, thinking the American was vulnerable, they were met with a fully loaded rifle ready for immediate, devastating fire. This simple human ingenuity, born of life-or-death necessity, elevated the Garand from a superior machine to a lethal tactical system. The increased rate of fire had massive logistical consequences. The Garand's effectiveness was entirely dependent on a relentless flow of .30-06 ammunition. An American rifleman could easily expend 100 rounds in a single day of heavy fighting, far more than his bolt-action counterpart. This demand placed an enormous burden on the supply lines snaking up the Italian coast. Every bullet fired by an M1 represented raw material, factory time, shipping lanes, and manpower. This was the hidden, true power of the American war machine, the ability to feed the M1's prodigious appetite. The semi-automatic rifle did not just change tactics, it dictated the scale and capacity of the entire logistical framework, transforming the American soldier into a walking, talking engine of industrial destruction. The next phase of the war would show what happens when the Garand faced the German defenses head-on, turning the tide from defense to attack. January-May 1944. Monte Cassino. The battle for Monte Cassino remains one of the most grueling, complex, and devastating campaigns of the Italian front. Here, the raw power of the M1 Garand was tested against the most formidable German defenses, the Gustav Line. The terrain was steep, rocky, and unforgiving, giving the advantage to the deeply entrenched defender. The combat evolved into a brutal, house-to-house, hill-to-hill grind, where technology had to be married perfectly with human grit. The German defenders, elite units of Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers, were equipped with the formidable MG-42 machine gun, known to the Allies as Hitler's buzzsaw for its terrifying rate of fire, up to 200 rounds per minute. The fight for Cassino was often described as a duel between the MG-42's sustained fire and the combined rapid response fire of the American infantry, anchored by the M1 Garand. In the confined spaces of the ruins, the speed of the M1 became critical. A German machine gun team, having emptied a belt, required a moment to reload. That critical 2-second gap, which a bolt-action rifleman could only exploit with 1 or 2 rounds, allowed the Garand rifleman to empty an entire clip of 8, effectively suppressing the team or neutralizing the position entirely. The Italian campaign's mud, dust, and relentless rain severely challenged the M1. Critics had always warned about its complexity, but the genius of the design and the dedication of the Ordnance Corps proved the doubters wrong. The rifle was designed to be field-stripped into a manageable number of components, and every GI was rigorously trained in its maintenance. A Marine Corps Ordnance officer, Lieutenant Colonel Julian S. Hatcher, summarized the difference in design philosophy. The Mauser was designed to be durable under neglect. The Garand was designed to be reliable under proper care. The American soldier was transformed from a simple rifleman into a field mechanic, constantly cleaning the gas port, ensuring the proper lubrication of the bolt, and checking the integrity of the en-bloc clip. This high level of required maintenance fostered a deep connection between the soldier and his weapon, far beyond the casual ownership of a simple bolt action. The rifleman had to respect the machine. The machine, in turn, offered unparalleled performance. The Garand was designed as a battle rifle, yet its accuracy, especially the earlier models, was often superior to the bolt-action rifles it replaced. This accuracy, combined with its rapid second-shot capability, gave American marksmen an unexpected edge. In the mountains, enemy snipers, typically using Mausers or similar high-precision rifles, were accustomed to firing one shot and relocating. The Garand, however, allowed an American marksman to fire a highly accurate first shot, and then, critically, deliver a rapid, aimed second or third shot to adjust for wind, target movement, or to suppress the sniper's immediate area before he could bolt the next round. This semi-automatic sniping capability drastically reduced the effectiveness and longevity of Axis sharpshooters. A notable example came from the 3rd Infantry Division, where a platoon sergeant reported, "We took out 3 German snipers from one ridge line in under 10 seconds. They fired their first shot, and before they could cycle their bolt, 3 different M1s had put rounds directly into their hide. The speed was the killer." In an odd twist of battlefield evolution, the M1 Garand found a powerful secondary role as a grenade launcher. Fitted with the M7 grenade launcher attachment, the Garand could project rifle grenades with considerable range and accuracy. The irony lies in the power source. The semi-automatic mechanism of the rifle had to be disabled to fire the grenade. A simple plunger device cut off the gas flow. The rifle temporarily reverted to a straight pull bolt action, forcing the soldier to manually cycle the powerful grenade blanks. This temporary mechanical step backward highlighted the weapon's adaptability, proving that its core mechanism could be sacrificed for the sake of utility. The ability to quickly revert to 8 rounds of automatic fire once the grenade was launched made the M1 Rifleman an adaptable threat, capable of throwing heavy explosives one moment and transitioning to rapid suppression the next. The Battle of Cassino demonstrated that even the best technology cannot negate the human cost of a frontal assault. But the M1 Garand ensured that when the Americans did pay that cost, they did so with maximum strategic effect. The sheer volume of fire, the relentless, unending barrage delivered by millions of these rifles, was the foundation of the infantry advance. It was the constant drumbeat that wore down the German elite. It was in the smoking rubble of Cassino that the German High Command finally understood the true scale of the threat. The American soldier was not just brave, he was armed with a superior industrial instrument of war. The enemy was forced to devote disproportionate resources to counter-sniper teams and suppressive fire, simply to keep up with the overwhelming rate of fire from every single American on the line. The M1 did not guarantee victory, but it ensured that every defensive position cost the enemy dearly in time, men, and morale, preparing the stage for the strategic breakthrough that would finally turn the tide in Italy. May 1944, south of Rome. The final massive push to break the Gustav Line and open the road to Rome was codenamed Operation Diadem. This was the true climax of the Italian campaign, a coordinated Allied assault that would finally defeat the heavily fortified German defenses. By this point, the M1 Garand was no longer a novelty. It was an expected, calculated component of the American doctrine. The strategy relied on overwhelming firepower, not just artillery and air support, but the cumulative effect of hundreds of thousands of infantrymen delivering continuous semi-automatic fire. The German defense, which had held for months, began to crack under the relentless pressure of what they now understood was a different kind of war. A war of sustained, personal firepower. The battle reports highlight the change in Axis tactics. German troops were instructed to prioritize destroying the American infantryman's weapon before the man himself, a testament to the rifle's psychological importance. Enemy fire became concentrated on areas where rapid M1 fire was emanating. This forced the American soldier to become even more conscious of cover and movement, turning every advance into a highly tactical 8-round engagement. The psychological impact of the M1 was most pronounced on Axis replacement troops. Seasoned German paratroopers had adapted to the speed of the Garand, learning its P-ting flaw and developing counter-tactics. But the new, younger German and Italian conscripts arriving at the front had no such experience. They were still equipped with the traditional bolt-action mindset. When these newcomers first encountered a full platoon of American infantry laying down continuous fire, their perception was not that they were outnumbered, but that they were facing an alien, superior technology. A Wehrmacht lieutenant, captured near Anzio, 1944. The noise alone, it was not the steady beat of our machine guns, but a relentless, individual crack, 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 crack. You felt hunted, because every man facing you seemed to be carrying the weight of a light machine gun. Our newest recruits would often panic when the volume of fire reached a certain pitch. They had never been trained to fight against that. This psychological disintegration was a critical and often uncredited factor in the success of Operation Diadem. The M1 created a disparity in combat capability that led to a corresponding disparity in combat morale. While the battles raged, the industrial war back home provided the ultimate, unbreakable advantage. The continuous supply of M1 rifles and ammunition was the strategic backbone of the offensive. The U.S. industrial machine was hitting its peak, producing thousands of rifles a day, churning out the steel and brass necessary to feed the beast. Consider the contrast. The German war economy was constantly struggling with shortages, producing only a limited number of high-tech wonders like the V-2 rocket or the late-war Königsteiger tank. These were brilliant but low volume. The American strategy was the inverse: a single excellent, reliable weapon, the M1 Garand, produced in an overwhelming, impossible volume. General George S. Patton, Jr., though not directly involved in the Italian front at this time, famously called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. His praise was not just for the rifle's design, but for the industrial engine that allowed every single American rifleman to carry that immense advantage. The war was won not just on the battlefield, but in the factories. The Garand was a heavy rifle, and the Italian campaign was physically exhausting. Carrying the rifle, ammunition, grenades, and basic supplies up steep, rocky terrain was a constant, grueling effort. A fully equipped American rifleman was carrying over 80 pounds of gear, but the M1 provided a key form of resilience: confidence. Knowing that one's personal weapon offered a 3.1 advantage in firepower against most enemies was a powerful boost to morale. In the face of intense fire, this confidence was the critical psychological shield that prevented panic and fueled the advance. The soldiers understood the gravity of their mission. They knew they were fighting the most difficult terrain in Europe. They knew the enemy was determined, but they also knew that when the firefight began, they held the key advantage. They could shoot faster, suppress more effectively, and dictate the pace of the engagement. By late May 1944, the Gustav Line was shattered. The Allied forces poured through the breach, and the road to Rome was finally open. This strategic success was the ultimate proof of the M1 Garand's effectiveness. It demonstrated that superior individual firepower, distributed across an entire army, could ultimately overcome fixed defenses and determined resistance. As American troops pushed toward Rome, the sheer weight of their fire became an insurmountable obstacle for the retreating German forces. The battles in the Italian mountains had refined the M1 from a complicated new toy into a lethal, reliable tool of war. The stage was set for the final reckoning and the legacy of the 8-round thunder. June 4, 1944. Rome. The liberation of Rome was a key turning point, a symbolic victory that energized the Allied cause. As American troops marched into the ancient city, the M1 Garand was prominently displayed, becoming a symbol of the American infantryman. The lessons learned in the brutal mountains of Italy were immediately applied to the next, even larger stage: the invasion of Normandy. The Garand had proved its tactical thesis that the future of infantry combat belonged to the semi-automatic rifle. The firepower advantage, which had first shocked the Italian and German forces in Salerno, became the standard expectation across the entire European and Pacific theaters. The strategic irony was complete. The weapon that was almost abandoned in the 1930s, deemed too complex and heavy, was now heralded as the essential component of Allied success. The U.S. military's decision to commit to a mass-produced, technologically superior personal weapon was vindicated, transforming the average GI into a highly effective force multiplier. Following the war, the defeated Axis powers conducted extensive analysis of their shortcomings. The conclusion regarding infantry armament was stark and unanimous. The superiority of the semi-automatic rifle was undeniable. German ordnance experts admitted that their reliance on the bolt-action Kar-98K for the bulk of their forces was a critical mistake. They lamented the inability of their complex and slow-to-produce Gewehr 43 to match the M1's deployment scale. The lesson was clear. It wasn't enough to have a good design, you needed a great design that could be produced by the millions. The M1 Garand inspired a generation of post-war military rifle development. The Soviet Union's adoption of the SKS semi-automatic rifle, and eventually the fully automatic AK-47, were direct acknowledgements of the firepower gap the M1 had exposed. The era of the single-shot bolt-action rifle as the standard infantry weapon was decisively over. The M1 Garand developed a relationship with its users that few other weapons of the war achieved. It was more than a tool. It was a companion, a lifesaver, and a direct link to the industrial might that supported the American soldier. Veterans spoke of the M1 with a unique blend of technical respect and deep affection. They appreciated its reliability under duress, its powerful thump against the shoulder, and the sheer volume of controlled fire it allowed them to deliver. The iconic peating, once a source of terror, became a badge of a veteran rifleman, a sound that could be manipulated and managed in the heat of battle. Sergeant Major, Reta Meriris, James K. Sullivan, 5th Army. That rifle became an extension of your arm. You could feel the mechanics working. You knew when that last round was coming, and you knew that 8 rounds was enough to get you out of most anything. It was heavy, yes, but it carried the weight of a whole factory behind it. That's what won the small battles. Beyond the battlefield, the Garand remains a masterpiece of engineering. Its gas system, which bled off a small amount of gas to cycle the action, was a mechanical triumph of precision and robust design. The requirement for a reliable clip-ejecting system led to the unique en-bloc clip, a piece of stamped steel that became the rifle's signature feature. The Garand proved that complexity, when designed for mass production and coupled with rigorous maintenance training, could yield decisive combat superiority. It wasn't the most accurate rifle, and it certainly wasn't the lightest, but in the muddy, terrifying trenches and mountain passes of Italy, it offered the perfect balance of firepower, reliability, and stopping power. The story of the M1 Garand in the Italian campaign is a micro-history of the entire war. It is a story of a reluctant technological revolution, a demonstration of the power of industrial scale, and a deep dive into the psychological warfare waged at the most personal level. The infantry skirmish. The M1 did not win the war alone, but it provided the American riflemen with a margin of advantage that was often the difference between life and death. The speed shock it delivered to the Italian and German fronts forced the enemy to fight on unfamiliar terms, under a relentless barrage that felt impossible to counter. The sound of that final metallic P-ting was the sound of a closing chapter, the end of one era of infantry combat and the beginning of another. It was indeed the thunder of victory. The story of the M1 Garand is just one thread in the vast, complex tapestry of the Second World War. If you found the technical precision, the strategic irony, and the human drama of the 8-round thunder compelling, then hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We are committed to bringing you more in-depth, historically accurate documentaries on the technology and the people who fought the greatest conflict in history. Leave a comment below. What other forgotten weapons or campaigns deserve a deep dive? Your support helps us tell these vital stories.